Taiwan shows off its missile firepower as it trains to protect its skies from China. Record high incomes for Taiwanese, but some are still struggling to make ends meet.
I think the key issue here in Taiwan is that the minimum wage in Taiwan is too low, far too low for basic standard of living.
Fighting for fairness, campaigners push to make it easier for foreigners to become Taiwanese. Plus, to find out how this bird, known for walking on water, is coming back from the brink. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Taiwan has been showing off its military power, launching a series of surface-to-air missiles at a test site in the country's southeast. The live fire drills come against the backdrop of mounting cross-strait tensions. Jaime Okan reports from Pingtung County.
Taiwan's military testing its air defense. The military is conducting 3 days of annual tests on a variety of weapons in its arsenal. This round includes a US-made Patriot air defense system and Taiwan's own Skybow 3. Both of these systems are crucial for protecting the skies above Taiwan.
这一次精准飞弹射击的任务规划，主要目的在验证精准弹药的效能以及装备的可靠度。我们今天的科目主要是以反飞机作战为主。
These kinds of drills have been conducted for decades, but this is the first time in over 12 years that the military has opened its doors to this base. This facility is known as Jiupeng Base, and it's one of Taiwan's most secret bases. That's because not too many people have been inside. It's located in the southeastern part of the country, and it's here where Taiwan tests some of its most advanced weapons. The military is closing the airspace and waters around Jiupeng Base during the tests, as fighter jets and warships will also be joining later this week. The exercises are part of Taiwan's effort to boost its defense, as it's faced with the threat of invasion from neighboring China, which claims the country as part of its territory. For decades, Taiwan has relied heavily on the US for its defense, purchasing almost all of its weapons from Washington. But with a record defense budget nearing approval, that might be about to change.
It has been Taiwan's defense policy to try to be relatively more reliant on their own industrial bases. If you have your own system produced or you integrate your own system, then it's much easier to maintain those systems.
Taiwan has poured billions of US dollars into developing its own weapons programs, and that includes making advanced missiles capable of hitting Chinese fighter jets in the event of a war. Missile production has slowly grown from about 300 missiles a year in 2020 to now producing more than 1,000 missiles annually. Military officials say if China's attacked, Taiwan would need tens of thousands of missiles, and that's why some say more needs to be done.
In particular, ramping up missile production is incredibly important. I hope that continues. I don't think that Taiwan right now is where it needs to be in terms of just pumping out the munitions and missiles that it would need during a contingency.
Exercises like these serve dual roles, practicing for the worst case scenario while also acting as a deterrent by demonstrating the country's resolve. But the key to any defense isn't just in training Taiwan's soldiers, it's making sure they have the equipment they need to succeed. Ryan Wu and Jaime Okan in Pingtung County for TaiwanPlus.
Australia and Indonesia have agreed to a defense deal that will allow their militaries to operate from each other's countries. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced the new treaty-level pact on Tuesday.
This historic treaty will bolster our strong defence cooperation by deepening dialogue, strengthening interoperability and enhancing practical arrangements.
Appearing with Indonesian President-elect Prabowo Subianto, Albanese said the agreement is vital to the two countries' security and the stability of the region. Australia and Indonesia share the world's longest maritime border and already cooperate on combating drug and human trafficking. Subianto said he looks forward to further partnerships with Canberra across various fields. Questions are being raised over the country's rental subsidy program. The government program is being extended for another 2 years, but critics say it's not actually working. John Van Trieste explains.
As he works to complete his master's degree, Wu Shidao calls this home of less than 13 square meters home. By Taipei standards, his monthly rent of $140 is a bargain. And thanks to a government rental subsidy program expanded last July and now set to continue through 2026, he pays less than $30.
房东也没有觉得怎么样，就租补贴要写，可能契约比较详细嘛，然后他就会愿意帮我们再重新写一些更详细的契约。
But Wu is one of the lucky ones. Housing justice advocates say they see landlords using subsidies as an excuse to raise rents. They're especially concerned about tenants who unknowingly rent on the black market. According to estimates from recent years, about 80% of rental units are unregistered, meaning their landlords don't pay tax on rental income. That means most renters in Taiwan would accidentally out their landlords to the tax office if they ask for subsidies, leaving them open to retaliation.
其实政府现在是都没有办法控管这件事情的，因为租黑市的关系，政府也不知道说到底哪个地方因此而涨得特别的多，对，所以就很难制定一个比较完善的住宅政策。
But officials from the Interior Ministry see things differently. The expansion of the subsidy program last year was meant to help up to 500,000 people. That goal has already been broken.
核定我们已经超过60万户，表示什么？民众对这一块其实他是申请是很踊跃的，表示他的确需要政府来给他做帮忙。
But Taiwan's cost of living continues to rise. This year, the Consumer Price Index is expected to go up by over 2%. When average incomes are factored in, Taiwan is one of the world's most expensive housing markets, meaning rental prices continue to be a political issue. Joseph Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A decent rental may be hard to come by in Taiwan, but there is some good news. Income is rising. The average annual income was $22,200 in 2023. That includes wages, investments, rental income, and is about $150 more than in 2022. Income for Taiwanese workers under 30 increased by more than $250. They earned on average $17,000 last year. The government statistics agency says an improving economy and lower unemployment is behind the rise, but financial analysts say that young people are still struggling to make ends meet. For more on what these new statistics mean for household finances in Taiwan, Rick Lauert spoke to labor rights advocate Roy Nguyen.
So the latest government statistics show that annual income is on the rise in Taiwan, but does this give the full picture for Taiwan households?
An approach that would be more in line with the lived reality of individuals in Taiwan is to look at how much they actually need to earn for basic necessities and to ensure that the amounts that they're earning should meet that. And my own calculations are that the basic the income needed for basic necessities in Taiwan would be about 40,000 to 50,000 Taiwanese dollars. So the monthly earnings of about $46,000 that has just been released is only adequate for barely a basic living needs. And this already includes investment returns and rental income. For those who do not have these, they will not be able to meet their basic daily necessities.
So we know that the economy is growing and the income is up, but what pressures are households in Taiwan under when it comes to earning money and spending money?
I think the key issue here in Taiwan is that the minimum wage in Taiwan is too low, far too low for a basic standard of living. To the Ministry of Labor's credit, the other big budget item in Taiwan is housing. And housing takes up a huge proportion of the wage of average workers. It takes up about 45% of the average worker and as much as 70% of those living in Taipei. So that takes up a huge chunk of the living of the income needed that can be used to purchase other basic necessities. Taiwan's grocery prices as compared to its wages are actually very high as compared to other advanced countries, and this means that the average household has to fork up quite a huge amount of money for groceries. And the wholesale and retail trade sector in Taiwan actually earn huge profits as compared to other advanced countries.
We know that the rising cost of living and house prices were big issues in the presidential election earlier this year. The president's now been in office for a few months. Is there any sign that he's doing anything to tackle this problem?
I feel that there are some promising signs. Under the Minimum Wage Deliberation Committee, they released a research report that has tried to push back on some of the rhetoric and propaganda that business groups have been pushing. For example, they have been saying that the minimum wage increase will result in higher unemployment and higher consumer prices, but the report has showed that there is no strong correlation between minimum wage increases and unemployment and consumer prices. The research report has also showed that the minimum wage can result in average prices increasing and benefiting other workers.
That was labor rights advocate Roy Ng on Taiwan's latest income statistics. Campaigners are pushing for Taiwan to open its doors to more citizens. They say as the country tries to attract more overseas talent, it makes sense for foreigners to be allowed to have dual nationality. Louise Watt has more.
What's that? Milk. Yes. Kaixin is happy.
Tech industry professional Sam Khan and his wife Jane are testing their daughter's Chinese. Surprised at all the words she already knows. They bought this house a year ago and set up home here in Kaohsiung, Taiwan's largest port city. Khan gave up his Pakistani nationality to become Taiwanese, a decision he made for his daughter.
You know, it's a highly developed country with very safe, good education, good quality standard of living, and I wanted my daughter to have access to Taiwan, have the right to live here freely as a Taiwanese.
But to his frustration, 4-year-old Zara is still not Taiwanese. She was born here to Khan and his Filipino wife before he gained citizenship. And under Taiwanese rules, she has to renounce her Filipino citizenship too, which as a child she can't do.
It's my papa.
Unlike Khan, of the 3,000 to 4,000 foreigners who become citizens here each year, less than 3% don't have to give up their original nationality, deemed by the government to be highly specialised or to have made a significant contribution to Taiwan. Like the late US missionary and English teacher Doris Browham, who was handed a Taiwanese passport by former President Tsai Ing-wen after 72 years in the country. Now a campaign is pressing the government to make it easier for foreigners to become Taiwanese, arguing that more citizens could even help Taiwan as it faces an existential threat from China.
One of the things that, China is putting its mark on Taiwan is to say that, well, you guys are mostly ethnic Chinese, and hopefully with more diversity, with more countries and their people invested in Taiwan on a longer term basis, this will provide some type of even greater hesitation on the part of China to be like, well, we're just going to take it over.
Non-profit group Crossroads says that making foreigners renounce their original nationality is unreasonable and unfair, especially as Taiwanese can have dual nationality. The push to make it easier to gain citizenship comes as Taiwan ages fast. Next year, it's set to become a super-age society, meaning that more than a fifth of its population will be 65 or over. That means higher healthcare costs, fewer working-age people to pay for them, and potentially slower economic growth. Activists say welcoming more people will help to offset all that. But the Ministry of Interior declined to say whether there were any plans to change or debate the nationality law, telling TaiwanPlus that foreigners must renounce their nationality to avoid active conflicts of nationality between parties in enjoying rights, performing obligations, and national loyalty. Khan, who works for a firm making materials for high-tech devices, remembers his citizenship process as stressful, at times fearing he might become stateless. Despite that, he says he doesn't regret it. And if China does one day attack and many people flee, he will stay behind.
So for me, these are my people, and I would protect my home, I'd protect my city, I'd protect my neighbors, I'd protect my people.
Khan hopes his new country will make it easier for others to follow in his footsteps. People born elsewhere who do not just feel at home here, but want to proudly call themselves Taiwanese. Klein Wong and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break. Joe Biden makes an impassioned plea to Americans not to vote for Donald Trump.
我自己少遇见一朵花，我可能就不是这个样子。
开始思考什么叫做一个本土性，
大声的唱出来说我是台湾人。
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has made a surprise appearance on the first day of the Democratic National Convention. More than 4,000 delegates will attend the convention over 4 days as the Democratic Party attempts to ramp up enthusiasm for Harris's bid for the White House. Rosie Greninger reports.
To a roaring crowd, presidential hopeful Kamala Harris takes the stage on the first day of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Not expected until the convention's closing, her appearance now a surprise, to pay tribute to President Joe Biden and thank him for his leadership before speaking directly to voters.
This November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward. With optimism, hope, and faith.
Vice President Kamala Harris and running mate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz are riding a wave of voter enthusiasm into the DNC that has transformed the race against former President Donald Trump. Just 3 months out from the election, the new pair of Democratic hopefuls were put forward when President Joe Biden ended his re-election bid, after a growing number of Democrats questioned his ability to lead for another 4 years. Since the baton was passed to Harris, she's seen a sharp rise in support, polling 49% nationally among registered voters, over Donald Trump's 45%. Speakers here today took aim at Trump and celebrated Biden's leadership over the past 4 years. Then the man in command took the stage himself, recounting the accomplishments of his administration, noting Harris's role.
Are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, President and Vice President of the United States? I stand before you now on this August night to report that democracy has prevailed Democracy has delivered, and now democracy must be preserved.
More than 4,000 delegates will gather in Chicago over the 4-day convention, as politicians, celebrities and supporters champion Harris's bid for the White House and officially nominate her for president. The Democratic Party unveiled their platform in July when Biden was still running for president, proposing a raised minimum wage, more affordable childcare, lower healthcare costs, clean energy projects, increasing women's reproductive rights, and bans on assault weapons. The platform also mentions support for a negotiated two-state solution between Israel and Palestine amid the war raging in Gaza. It's a major issue striking a chord with voters, with many taking to the streets outside the conference to demand Harris end American support for Israel.
I think it's important for them to realize that they can't take our votes for granted. The Democratic National Committee needs to be opposed to genocide. It needs to be pro-justice. It needs to take active steps to create a more just and equitable society. Words aren't enough. Actions are what we need to see.
At least 4 protesters were arrested outside the venue after breaking through a security fence. Many demonstrators claiming the Democratic Party could lose their vote if they don't act to end the war. Votes that will be crucial in sustaining support for Harris, with Democrats and Republicans neck and neck in the race to the White House. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
A Philippine former mayor who was accused of being a Chinese spy may have fled the country. That's according to one of the country's lawmakers who presented evidence she says shows Alice Guo flew to Malaysia in July. Guo was being investigated over a Chinese online gambling operation in her town that was found to be a front for a scam center. The discovery by police led to questions about her background, with some lawmakers claiming that she was originally a Chinese national. Guo has said she was born in the Philippines. The country's Justice Department and Guo's lawyer says she has not left the country. Lawmakers are now pressing her to have her passport canceled. China and Vietnam have signed a raft of deals to boost ties. China's President Xi Jinping has met with his Vietnamese counterpart To Lam in Beijing. It's Lam's first overseas trip since becoming leader.
我愿同你建立良好工作关系和个人友谊，共同引领中越命运共同体建设走深走实。
To Lam became Vietnam's Communist Party chief earlier this month. He told Xi that China is a top foreign policy priority for Vietnam. A statement from the Vietnamese government says the two leaders agreed to boost defense and security ties. They signed 14 deals to boost cooperation, including on transport and trade. One person has been killed and 6 are missing after a yacht carrying tech tycoon Mike Lynch sank off the Italian coast. 15 people were rescued from the seas near Sicily, where the yacht was moored. Authorities believe a waterspout similar to a tornado sank the vessel. Lynch is a British-Irish tech entrepreneur and was recently found not guilty of fraud in the U.S. His 18-year-old daughter is among those missing. A bird that was once considered a nuisance by farmers here in Taiwan and at one point only numbered around 50 is now thriving. Chris Gordon looks at how this very special species was brought back from the brink.
Here in the lotus ponds of Kaohsiung's Meinong district in southern Taiwan, vegetable farmers live alongside the pheasant-tailed jacana. The bird is famous for its habit of walking on top of the floating plants. They not only search for food on the surface of the plants, but they also lay and hatch their eggs. Locals say the birds can draw a crowd.
肉眼看就看得出来了。
有几只大的？
这边一只啦，在那个跑了，你看，在跑呢。跑那个是小的哦。对，黄黄的是小的。
每天很多赏鸟人士都在我的园子来拍，我还去搬那个椅子来给他们坐，很多，每天都很多啊。
It's a success story for the species. Farmers used to consider the birds a nuisance. At one point, there were only about 50 left in Taiwan. But about 20 years ago, farmers here began conservation efforts to protect the birds, and they now number more than 3,000. Efforts have included using labeling to show customers that their farms help support the birds.
我每次就抱那个复制柠檬的那个袋子你没有包给人家看的话，人家都不晓得。
然后也是希望就是水质能够，农民的田当然它栖息的环境，对，农民如果有因此而受到一些损失的话，再把它水质当成一种资源这样子，也能够帮他们的野莲加分。
With labeling and use of 24-hour habitat live streams, the pheasant-tailed jacana has become a national favorite, showing that with a little creativity, farmers and conservationists can find a sustainable balance. John Su and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Sundance's Asia event is about to kick off in Taipei, where the world's largest independent film festival hopes to find new audiences.
This festival is a place for audiences to discover fresh voices, entertaining stories, and to take part in compelling conversations.
This is the second time Taipei has hosted Sundance. The 5-day festival includes screenings, public panels, and workshops with Taiwanese filmmakers. Taiwanese American director Sean Wang will be screening his film Didi, portraying a coming-of-age story of a Taiwanese teenager in California.
The hope was to kind of to contribute something to a genre that I really love, that in the States at least never, had a kid who looked like me and my friends in these types of movies.
And we'd like to thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, take a look at footage of the first supermoon of 2024 from across the globe. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.